All right, so let's kick off with stand up like we always do. What did we learn yesterday? What did we do yesterday?
We learned that the open and close brackets for HTML kind of contains the information we need on the web page to be seen for the users.
Yep. So we got our first taste of HTML, and I don't want you guys to be overwhelmed. Did review the 30-second feedback last night, and I know a couple of you said too fast, a couple of you said too slow. Don't worry, we've got I think at least 3 weeks of HTML, right? So this is kind of meant to be your first exposure with it. Today we'll go a little bit slower, not only with building your HTML elements, getting that syntax down, getting practice with it, but also getting to test with your CSS, right? So today's the first day that HTML is only one half of the equation. The other half today is CSS, right? So the two kind of go together, not only for styling, but also for layout. So we think about our HTML as not only our content, but our structure. And then we think about the CSS as modifying that, styling it, making things appear the way that we want them to, all of that good stuff. So that's coming down the pipeline. What else did we learn yesterday? What did we spend time on?
The lists, the
Yep.
unordered versus ordered lists. And oh, also the table. I like the table because I didn't know about that. I think I skipped that part in Codemy, but about like the table header and the table row, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, so we saw a couple different elements. We saw how a list item can be used in both an ordered list and an unordered list. When it's an unordered list, it's kind of a weird name for bullets, but that's what they call it. So that's what we use. And they are very powerful in terms of laying items out. We can actually do lists that aren't just vertical. We can also do horizontal lists and all kinds of cool stuff with that. So those are definitely helpful HTML elements. Anything else from yesterday?
We also learned about the A anchor. You're able to link like a website, and then you're able to click on the that particular like link. Say it was like my first link, able to click on it and then send you to another website.
Yeah, and anchor tags are really helpful. One, because obviously we use links all over the internet, but also it's the first time we saw attributes, right? And so normally when we think of HTML, we think about the content that goes between the tags, but there are what we call attributes that we put inside the opening tag, and that allows that tag to perform some additional functionality. That may not seem super important right now, but as we get into CSS with classes and IDs, we'll be using those attributes left and right. So those attributes are used not only for making that tag behave the way that we want it to in the case of the anchor tag, we also use that to apply different styles to it. And down the road, we'll also be using those attributes to apply JavaScript to our tags as well. So that's coming down the road too. What else did we do yesterday? One other major thing.
General syntax and layout and indentation of HTML.
Yep. Not what I was thinking of, but yes, definitely important. Indentation is one of those things that you get it running on the computer and you go, oh, well, how important can this be? And then down the road, you find out that when you're working in files that can be thousands of lines long, that indentation is really important because our brain, even though we don't realize it, subconsciously we pick up on those indentation patterns, right? So because we are visual people, that indentation lets us understand and break our code into different blocks. And so that indentation will come with time. And then as we get more comfortable with the indentation in the syntax, we'll introduce you to a tool called Prettier. And Prettier will help with all of that indentation and fix it for you. But I have found in my years of teaching experience that it is often better to practice with that indentation to understand it, to know why we indent, and then work our way up to a tool that helps us automate that. Also helps when Prettier breaks, that means there's something wrong with our code, and oftentimes fixing the indentation manually will help us understand what is wrong with our code. So that's something that will come with practice. What was the other major thing that we spent a solid hour on yesterday?
Going over the Figma activity that we did.
Exactly. And that's really important to identify, right? Because as developers, we like to think about our productivity of just what we coded, right? What lines of code did we write? What can we prove that we did? But it's also really important to realize that we live in a meeting culture, right? Where we spend hours and hours of days in meetings. And so identifying that in, hey, I didn't get a ton of coding done yesterday because we were in a meeting. That's not to say that all meetings are bad, but it's certainly something to analyze as where we spend our time, because as engineers, our salaries are often one of the most expensive pieces of the company, right? So it's good as a developer to look back and go, you know what, I did spend an hour yesterday just reviewing what we accomplished. Does that make it a bad thing? No, not at all, right? That means that we were able to go back, look at the work that we did. As a greater team, we were able to appreciate the different pieces that we ran into. We learned some lessons from the other team. We were able to see the finished product, so to speak, and how all of that worked together. We don't want to just look at non-development time as something where it's just like, yeah, we did that, whatever. We want to look at that and go, yeah, that was worthwhile time to review that, to learn from it, to understand how to do it better next time, and also to kind of learn from each other, right? So that was all worthwhile identifying in our stand-up. So oftentimes when I'm filling out my stand-up for work, I'm like, I got one thing done yesterday. How did I only get one thing done yesterday? And then I look at my calendar and it's just a wall. It looks like a rainbow threw up on it, right? I've got all these different meetings and different calendars, all these things going on. So it's always worthwhile to analyze what you accomplished yesterday. Anything else that we wanted to touch on from yesterday, or any potential roadblocks or things that we wanted to cover or recover today before we dive into CSS? Any questions? Okie doke. So we are going to dive into CSS today. We are going to learn about lots of cool things like classes and IDs, how to link CSS to an external file. I'm going to pull up our outline here so you've got something visual. And then today is really the first day that we practice with our file management. So we're going to practice duplicating our file. We're going to practice opening it in VS Code. That's something that's going to take, 10 minutes to do today. It will take 5 minutes to do once we get practiced at it, and it will be something that happens pretty regularly. Your PEX card should have arrived by now. If they don't arrive by the end of the week, please shoot me a message. The mail has gotten slightly less reliable than it used to be. So if you don't receive your PEX card, definitely shoot me a Slack message. We already did stand-up. I talked about file setup. We're going to talk about how to do CSS in an external file, and how to kind of lay things out in our VS Code. We'll go over a couple different options for you. And then we are going to jump into all of the most common CSS properties. And that's really important to add, because while there are only, about 10 on that list, there are probably hundreds of different CSS properties and little modifications on those as well. So just like I wanted to give you an introduction into Figma, this is kind of an introduction into CSS, right? So I do not claim to be a CSS expert. I would consider myself to kind of be mid-level in CSS. There are some I call them wizards of CSS that are able to style things and use properties in ways that are way more unique than I know what to do. But the good news is this is just the introduction, right? So we're going to get practice building probably 10 different websites over the next couple weeks, and every single one of them will be using some amount of CSS in them. We're also going to learn a little bit about Bootstrap, which is going to be the first framework that we learn of, hey, we can build all of our own CSS and we can kind of create unique things and all of that's great, but what if we want to use something that's already built, something that we can accelerate our designs by using this other framework that other developers smarter than us or more experienced than us have already built for us? So that is all coming down the pipeline. Any questions before we dive in?
Yeah, Max, how long do you think we need to work on HTML and CSS for, like in your opinion?
A lifetime. So our schedule, we spend, I think, let me double check. It's either we spend 3 weeks on HTML and CSS. That is certainly not enough to get to mastery. That is enough to get you to the point where you can say, hey, I can build a website. It may not be the prettiest website. It may be built with pre-made components using a framework like Bootstrap, but that will get you to the point where you can say, I can build a portfolio site and I've got enough HTML and CSS to start putting together my capstone, which again, we'll start talking about in a week or two. So believe it or not, in that 3 week period, we'll be able to build a website like Netflix, which is one of the final projects that we do in the HTML and CSS week. Does that mean that you would be able to design something like that from scratch? No, probably not. But it means that you'll have enough technical knowledge that you can at least get started. So while it will take us, a couple hours in class to build a project, building that on your own may take a couple hours. Now, how long does it take to get that time down and get into more of a senior experience in building websites? Well, that all depends, right? Are you spending all day practicing building HTML and CSS? Are you a front-end developer? At that point, that could be a couple months of experience that could take you to really being able to build a website quickly. Or are you doing something more full stack where you're learning so many different things that your experience in one particular one takes a little longer? So the short answer, the easy answer is we're only spending 3 weeks in HTML and CSS. The slightly longer answer is that HTML and CSS only goes away for a week or two in our entire curriculum, and everything that we do is additional practice in HTML, CSS, or a framework like React, which is based off of HTML. And then the longest answer, the most complicated answer is, well, it depends what you're doing in your career, right? No one expects you as an entry-level developer to know everything about HTML and CSS, right? This is not a topic that you can, read through everything in Free Code Camp or our curriculum or whatever it is and go, check, I've mastered HTML and CSS. That's not really something that, there's a gauge where you can say, I know it all, right? I'm good to go on this. But over time with practice and building projects, that's something that you can get to my level where you can say, well, I still don't know everything about HTML and CSS, but I know enough that if you threw a website at me, 95% chance I would be able to build that. And then it just becomes a matter of time. And with experience, that time obviously shrinks of how quickly you can build something.
And another thing too, I was playing around with the code yesterday. I was trying to figure out forms a bit. So I know what like some websites have like enter like your email and password at like the top right corner and stuff. I was trying to figure out how do I get that to go up there rather than at like the bottom and stuff. But I just don't understand it.
That is, I love the ambition. Wait until today when we start playing around with CSS, because that will unlock a whole new world of layout. And then if you still have that question tomorrow, re-ask it tomorrow, and we can dive into practicing with our CSS and talking about layout.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Just see. Yeah, so we spend a little bit more time with Bootstrap in tomorrow's class, and we will build a weather project. So just to give you a taste, hopefully this is, no, I don't have it deployed there. All right, we'll dive into that tomorrow. Any other questions? Okie doke. So we are going to dive in today the way that we normally dive in, which is we are going to open Finder. We're going to head to our desktop, and I, for whatever reason, always find it easier to manage files in Finder than I do in VS Code. So that doesn't mean we can't do these things in VS Code, but when we're working with files in particular, I like to do it in Finder. So I go down to my desktop, I pop open Finder. You can also open your C6 My Code or whatever you called it folder from your desktop directly. We're going to go into the week 2 folder. And normally we would go to day 1 and go ahead and duplicate that. But I'm not going to duplicate it because I'm going to start from scratch today, right? I'm not going to make any new files, or I'm only going to make new files. I'm not going to work on what we did yesterday. So I'm going to right click, 2 fingers, tap on your trackpad to right click, or you can hold in Control and single click. That will bring up the right click menu. Go to New Folder. And I am going to call that day 2. D2. Remember, no spaces. If you want to use a space, use a dash or an underscore. That will make your life much easier as we get into the terminal. With that said, instead of going down and opening VS Code and then going to File and Open Folder, you're going to see a little shortcut today. We already have this folder open in Finder. So we're able to grab our day 2 folder and drag and drop that right on top of the VS Code icon in our doc. If you do not have VS Code in your doc, what you are able to do, I'm going to go ahead and quit it. You don't have to follow the quitting step. You can see I just removed VS Code from my doc. What I'm able to do is open that manually. Remember, we always want to open VS Code from our applications folder, never from downloads or the desktop or a disk image. So I'm going to pop open VS Code, and you can see it's in the right section of my doc right here. If I don't want it in the recent section, if I want to anchor that or keep it in my doc, I'm able to click and drag that right over to the left section of my doc. That means that that will always stay there. And while you're at it, it's probably a good idea to go through and clean up some icons on your doc. So if you are a Chrome user and you still have Safari in your doc, or if like iMovie's down there and you're like, I'm never going to use iMovie, you can right click on any icon, go up to options, and then uncheck keep in doc. And that will remove some icons out of there. So things like Slack and Zoom and VS Code, all good things to have in your doc, but feel free to customize that. And you can also reorder it however you want. So if you want VS Code over a little bit more, drag and drop, make the computer your own. Does not need to look like mine, does not need to look like any other students, but make it your own, and that's going to make you a little bit more comfortable on it. So with that said, now, oh, question?
I got a question.
Excuse me, Max.
Yeah.
I just tried to open up a new folder on there to create day 2, but it's only giving me create new folder at terminal for some reason.
Are you creating the folder in Finder?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right. Okay. Where is it?
I did just run into this. What you might have to do is make sure you don't have day 1 highlighted when you're selecting it, when you're trying to double tap, make sure you're off into white space. And then you should actually see the new folder stuff.
Okay. All right, let me see. No. Open a new tab. Open a new terminal. No, I don't see it.
Share your screen. Let's just see where you're at.
Oh, it's not shared. Oh, my apologies. I thought I shared it.
All good. Okay. When you are right clicking, you should be right clicking kind of in this area over here. because we want to create it in the day 2 folder, and now you can go down to new folder.
All right. Yes, sir. There we go. My apologies.
No problem.
Max, I got a
then-
question. I
Yeah.
see that you don't have your launch pad and your dock. Do you have some sort of keyboard shortcut to get to it?
I never use my Launchpad. Maybe I'm a little too old school of a Mac user. I launch everything from my dock. And then the only other thing that I do is the Spotlight, which is Command Space. So you
Okay.
can hit Command Space, type in whatever application you're trying to open, and hit Enter, and that's like a quick keyboard shortcut for that. But I am a little old school. I don't use Launchpad. That's not to say that you shouldn't. It's just that I don't.
Oh yeah, and you can also see all your applications in Finder, right?
Yeah, so I do have all of my applications. That is a really good question. I have my applications down in my dock. So if I need to open something manually, I prefer to open it from my dock and
What?
grab
How
it
do you
from
do that?
here. So I will show you how to do that. Let me remove it first. So in Finder, if you pop open a new window and go to Applications, you
Yeah.
can grab that applications from the sidebar. Be very careful not to let go of this while you're dragging, because otherwise it disappears from the Finder sidebar. But if you grab that and drag that down to your dock over in the third section, the rightmost section, and let go, it will create a little section for you right there. And then you can click on that and it'll open everything right up. I
Wow.
also have that done for my downloads. That may be a default, but that
Oh
is
yeah, I have that for my downloads.
yeah, cool. The other thing I don't like about downloads, sometimes it opens in a grid, and my downloads, I only ever want my most recent things. So you can right click on downloads and then say view content as fan, and that will only ever show you like the last 10 things that you have open. And then whenever I need something older than that, I'm probably going to go to Finder anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, all Mac customization things, not anything that you have to do, just some options for you. Okay, so let me do that step one final time. I'm going to go to my desktop, my code week 2. I'm going to make sure my day 2 folder is inside of my week 2 folder, because at the end of this, you're going to have 23 weeks of different day folders. So you're going to want to make sure they're organized. In my day 2 folder, it is empty, but I'm going to grab that folder by the icon, drag it down to my VS Code in my dock, and let go. And that will open up my day 2. Anyone have troubles getting their day 2 folder created and opened in VS Code? Okay. From here, I am going to grab the new file icon. If I hover over day 2, these icons appear. They're kind of annoying that they disappear when you're not over it. Of course, you could go File, New File, but this new file icon is actually a slightly better way of doing it than we did yesterday, because it makes you name the file right out of the gate. And that's kind of nice, because sometimes you start working in a file and forget to save it, and then you forget to name it, and then you can't find it, and it's a mess, right? So I like this new file icon right over here, and I'm going to call it index.html. Remember, index.html is kind of a special name for the computer. It just knows that that's going to be our homepage. And the .html is telling VS Code what syntax are we using? What kind of file is this? What kind of language are we using for this file? So I'm going to go ahead and call that index.html. And today will be the last day we create an HTML file from scratch. Tomorrow, I'll show you a little shortcut that drops in all of the different things that we need for an HTML file. Why don't we do that today? Because it's really good to get the practice of typing the syntax, getting the indentation right. I know that I go very fast in my typing. I actually had someone 2 cohorts ago ask me what program I use to auto insert text. And I went, no, that's just me typing. That's something that comes with practice. Don't worry, you will get faster at typing code, just like you are much faster at typing text. Or think all the way back to your first touchscreen phone. It was really frustrating to get started, and then over time you just learned it. That does come with syntax, so just give it time. All of that said, who remembers the 3 required tags for any HTML file?
HTML.
1,
Body.
body, and
Head.
head. So HTML is, hey, all of this stuff in this file is HTML. Our head is all of the information that the browser uses that doesn't necessarily display to the end user or isn't in the main page content. And then the body is the opposite, right? That's everything that does show up to that end user. So I'm going to create my HTML element, and that opening tag makes the closing tag automatically appear. That's helpful. But we want to keep in mind that when we hit enter, it's going to do a lot of the indentation work for us. So if you are someone who types by having to look at the keyboard, fortunately, that's a skill that is more and more developed. But that's something to keep in mind, is that your computer is going to do a lot of autocomplete work for you. So get a little practice in saying, all right, that auto inserted, what does that mean for me? That means when I hit the enter button, I'm going to be between those two tags. I'm also going to create my head tag, move my cursor outside of the head tag, and create my body tag.
I'm sorry, can you do that one more time?
Yep. So we're going to create three things. One is our HTML tag, the shift comma for our opening lesson arrow, HTML closing. That's going to put our HTML in automatically. We're going to hit enter to get the indentation. Then we're going to create two more tags, a head tag and also a body tag. Make sure your body is not inside of your head. What do we mean by inside? Anything that comes before this closing tag and after this opening tag will be inside that element, right? So whenever we are inside of an element that is more than one line, we indent a level deeper. So just to make sure our file was created correctly, we're going to create two elements. The first one is going to be a title tag, and we're going to call that intro to CSS. And then we're also going to create an H1 that also says CSS day 1. Now, to make this code run, we need a browser, right? We can't make this run without opening the file. Now, yesterday, we went into Finder, double-clicked on index.html, and we got our file. But there's a little bit of a downside to this. Anytime that we modify this file here, we have to go up and we have to refresh it. And we're like, all right, we're on a $1,000 Mac that has been running code for 40 years. Why can't the browser just say, hey, the file's been updated, auto refresh? Well, that's a really nice feature that is built into VS Code. Do you guys have a go live button down here in the bottom right of your screen? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me one second.
I do not.
Okay. So what we are going to do, make sure that cleared out, is we are going to head over on our left side here, Explorer's where we spend the most time. We're going to drop down to this square with 4 squares inside of it, and that is going to be our extensions. So go ahead and click on that, and we are going to install 2 separate extensions here. The first one is called Live Server. So up in this search box up here, go ahead and type in Live Server and hit enter. And if you want to expand the sidebar a little bit, you can. We want the first one that comes up there with 47.8 million downloads. That is a buttload for VS Code extensions. So that first one that we want, it's going to say launch a development, local, blah, 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 blah. 4.5 star rating. We're going to go ahead and hit install on that. And it's going to say installing, and then it will turn itself into a little gear. while we are in here, after you get your live server installed, we are also going to install something called Live Share. So if you go back up to your search bar, change server out to share, hit enter on that. And the one that we want is the one with 16.6 million downloads. Go ahead and hit install on that one as well. Live share we'll circle back to in a minute after we get our live server working and we get some CSS going. I will show you how to use a live share in addition to a live server. After you install your live share, you should have this icon over on the left. Don't need to click it yet, but you should have that there. I'm going to go ahead and close the extensions tab. That should bring me back to my index.html. If it doesn't, I can go to File Explorer and double click on index.html, and that should bring that back up. And now, down in the bottom, we should have a Go Live button. Go ahead and click on that Go Live button, and it will say starting for a second, and then pop open your CSS day one. Okay, that doesn't look any different from when we open the file directly in Finder, but you can see that this URL is a little funky. It says 127.0.0.1. That is an IP address. Don't worry, we're not getting into networking too much here, but that 127.0.0.1 is actually a special IP address. That IP address is called localhost. What does localhost mean? It basically means your own computer. You're accessing a URL over the network of your own computer. Kind of weird to think about. Don't worry, we'll be getting into networking a little bit later once we get into backend development. But you can see that it says index.html here. And what's really cool about this is I can go back over to my VS Code. I can put an exclamation point at the end of my H1 content, hit save, and when I come back over to my browser, I don't have to refresh it. It just live updates for us. So live server is really helpful for HTML and CSS, but we can't necessarily use it for React. We have a different way of doing that for React that we'll get into down the road. For now, 99% of the time, we want to open our files using that live server. So as we're developing on it, we don't have to remember to refresh it all the time. Now, I'm going to answer a question before you forget. What happens if I close this? Because I may not remember that live server is 127.0.0.1:5601 / my file name, right? You can remember that. If you do remember that, you can type it back in and it will open up. Great. But as we're working on different projects, as we open different live servers, as we're juggling all of the windows, it's very easy to close this and then go, oh crap, I didn't mean to close that. How do I get that back? Well, over in VS Code, you'll see down here at the bottom, it says port 5601. Yours says 5600. That's okay. Don't panic. That's just something that I have customized on mine. But in order to get that live server back up, you can just hit that stop button down in 5601. That will bring back your go live button. And then if you hit that go live button again, it will just pop open that tab for you again. So if you are looking to restart your live server and it's already running, all you need to remember is that this stop 5601, do not enter down here, is what you'll hit to stop it and restart it. Seems like common sense, but really helpful tool. We'll be using this every day for the next 3 weeks while we are still in HTML and CSS, and even when we get into our JavaScript. Any questions about live server?
A little question. So if
Yeah.
we wanted to have let's just say this class try to use our site, are they able to go to that site when we do live server from our devices?
Yeah, great question. No, they are not. That requires some DevOps in order to be able to deploy our website, and deploy means basically publish to the internet, right? So
Okay.
this 127.0.0.1 is like your local host. if you wanted to connect to someone else's local host, they would either have to be on the same Wi-Fi network as you, or with the firewall disabled or with a rule set up for that to allow external traffic, or you would have to deploy your website. So there are ways called tunnels that would allow someone else to access your local host. We won't get too much into that in the boot camp, but this live server is only on your local host, meaning you're the only one who can access it, or other people on your router network, but not the global internet.
Gotcha.
It's
Yeah.
also called a loopback address, right?
Yes, it is called loopback. That's usually used more in Linux. I've heard it called localhost more than loopback, but loopback is another synonym for localhost. I haven't heard loopback in a while. That's a throwback. But yes, that is definitely an acceptable use term.
We use it at work to ping to make sure what our internet connection is.
Yes. And most computers will let you type in localhost instead of 127.0.0.1, but not all of them. It's a weird configuration of the operating system. Any other questions?
I was just saying that you said it's related to Linux. Our servers is a Linux environment. So I guess that makes sense why it's called loopback. I never thought
Yes. As far as I know, they are synonymous. I don't know why they call them both, but I'm not a networking expert. Took one semester of networking and went, well, I certainly don't want to make a career out of this. Okay, so we've got our very first live server up and running. We've got some live things updating, right? We're able to update our code. We're able to see that. We are first going to talk about the 3 different ways that we can apply some CSS. So, second here. Okay, so we saw we have some content in here. Let's go ahead and style that. So the first way that we saw yesterday we were able to style this was putting a style tag up in the head. And so we're going to go into, before that closing head tag, I put my cursor after title, I hit enter, that automatically did my indentation right for me, right? I'm indented a level in because I'm between 2 different tags. So I'm going to type in style, and then I am changing languages by doing that. I'm telling the browser, hey, anything between these style tags is no longer HTML. I am now using a different syntax. I am using CSS, cascading style sheets. And CSS is always broken down into a couple pieces. So CSS is broken down into a selector, a property, and a value. Okay, the selector is saying, hey, what do I want to select in my HTML to apply this style to? Anything in the curly brace is going to apply all the properties and values between those curly braces to whatever I select. The property is the property of the styling that I'm trying to change, and the value is what I am setting that property to. And then finally, the closing curly brace is saying I am done with whatever styles I want to apply to this selector. Lots of different ways that we can use selectors, but the easiest selector that we can use is saying apply this to all H1s. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go up to our style. Again, I'm indented 1 level deeper because now I am in the parent head of the child, the parent HTML, the child head, and the grandchild of style, right? Every time I go deeper, I am visually and hierarchically moving myself in there. So I'm going to type an H1 in here. And then I am going to put my curly braces, and I could do this all on one line, but it's very rare to see CSS all on one line. We normally break it down into multiple. So we keep our selector on the first line. We are able to use as many properties and values as we want, but only one property and value per line. It's not a requirement. Again, it's more of a CSS style. So in my H1, I'm going to use the most common property, which is color. So I'm going to say color, and I'm going to say pick whatever color you want. Let's go for magenta today. And CSS is kind of interesting. It will support lots of different color values. You may have seen CSS colors as a hex code, which is a # and then 6 digits, 0 through 9 in A through F. Yeah. That allows you to customize your color there. And in fact, there's a little kind of cool feature built into VS Code. So if you click on this little pink, it will give, or whatever color, and you hover over it, it will give you a color selector that you can come down here and pick a different color and just grab it. It will put that color in as what we call an RGB code, which is 0 to 255 through red, green, blue values. Again, CSS has all different ways of doing colors. So you can do hex codes, you can do RGB, RGBA, you can do named colors that are built into CSS. You can do HSL levels, which is another color encoding scheme. Basically, all of the ways to say, hey, there are like 32 million colors that the human eye can see. How do we tell the computer what color that we want to get to? But for today, I'm going to just use the name of the color. So pick whatever name you would like there. And as long as you get a little color square next to your color, that means that is a recognized color for CSS. And as soon as we save that, we're going to come over here and we should see our H1 is now in magenta or whatever color you picked.
Got a question.
Yeah.
So I've seen that you put a space after the colon for color and also a space in between the H1 and the curly brackets. Is that like for style or readability or?
Readability, not a requirement, and CSS will actually let you do all of that on one line with no spaces between them. As long as you have the curly braces, the colon, and the semicolon, you could actually do all of that on one line. But for readability, it's usually recommended to do a space after the selector, and also to do a space between the property and the value.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There's actually something called minification, which is when you're done with your website and you send it out to the internet for production use. It will actually go through your HTML and CSS and remove all of the different white spaces, because white spaces take up a tiny little bit more room in your file. So because it doesn't matter to the computer, when you ship to production, sometimes you minify your code, which is removing all of those spaces. But that is becoming slightly less rare to do in production now, just because the internet is so fast, the white spaces take up minimal amount of space.
Isn't there like a way to like auto correct that on when writing like HTML or CSS? I'm pretty sure there was a something to autocorrect that.
There's a code formatter built into VS Code. We'll be installing one called Prettier probably next week that automatically fixes your indentation and white spaces. But for now, we're going to leave that out, just so you get practice with getting your cursor in the right spot and practicing with the syntax. But yes, there is a tool called Prettier. You see that I already have it installed down here. If you want to jump ahead, you can. But I recommend getting practice with that syntax and kind of struggling with it a little bit, because when you do the syntax incorrectly and it doesn't work, it gives you practice at reading your code, identifying where the indentation is off, and kind of start your debugging journey that way. Any other questions? Okay. So we saw our H1 here, and we saw that we can apply it with a selector. There's another way that we can style our code as well. That is called inline CSS. So I'm going to make an H2 here and say second day of code, yay. And as soon as I hit Command S, you'll see, I'm going to kind of readjust my screens here a little bit, my second day of code automatically appears, right? So because it's a new element, we're still in the body, we still indent a level. But I did an H2 here just for a slightly different size. Opening tag, automatically put in my closing tag, and then inside that tag, I'm going to put second day of code. Now, why didn't I do it like this? This would be completely acceptable. It's usually when your content is going to span multiple lines that we want to put the tags on their own separate line. But if everything fits in one line, it's usually better to keep it all in one line. But the computer reads it the same way either way. No big deal if you like one over the other. So just like we were able to put an href into an anchor tag, an A tag, or we were able to put an src, a source, into our image tag, we're able to put certain attributes into any HTML element or tag. One that we are able to do is called style. We're so unique. So I'm going to type in style, enter, and it's going to auto insert some quotes for me. And inside those quotes, I am able to use some properties. So from there, instead of using color, let's use a new property. So I'm going to say font-weight is bold. Actually, that may be a bad one because H2 elements are automatically bold. So let's do another one instead. Let's do text decoration, underline, and just like that, we will see our code or our text gets underlined. So that's text dash decoration. Anytime we have a space in the property name, we use a dash in CSS. And all different kinds of things that we can do with text decoration. Give you a second, get your text underlined, and then we'll take a quick detour. Okay. Anyone have problems with their underline? Okay. Now you may be saying, Max, you're pulling all of these out of your butt. How do you know where all of these properties are coming from? How can I learn about these? What can I use instead of text decoration? What are the other different things here? Well, if you hover over the underline, you can see this thing pops up and you're like, well, that could kind of be helpful, but I don't really understand. You can click on this link that says MDM reference, and then you can say open there, and it's going to pop open some documentation. This is MDN, that is managed by Mozilla. Mozilla is the same company that makes Firefox. And you can see that there are all different kinds of documentation in here for saying, hey, you can use underline. You can even click on this little preview and it will show you that you can apply some additional properties. So you can say, I would like to underline, but I would like it dotted. Or that I would like my green underline to be wavy. And so there are all different properties you can apply here, and then it goes into all of the different things that it supports. So you can actually do something called an overline if you wanted to, instead of just an underline. Or you can specify the color, right? You can have two different values for that CSS property. But you can see this gets really technical, right? This has a lot of things in it where you're like, this isn't necessarily beginner friendly. This is great for me to understand all of the different things that are available to me, but this may be a little bit overwhelming, right? Well, W3 Schools tends to be a little bit of a more beginner friendly resource. So to access that, I can just do a search in Google and say CSS text decoration. And MDM may or not be the first thing that comes up, but guaranteed to be in the top 3 is MDM and W3 schools. So if I click on this text decoration property in W3 schools, we see kind of a similar information, but now all of a sudden it's a little bit more beginner friendly, right? We can see overline, line through, and underline. And if we click on this, try it yourself, we can see, hey, this heading 1 is what they call an overline. And we can also do a line through, like a strike through the text. So we get a little preview of it. And then if we scroll down, we get more information about the syntax. Okay, what kind of line do we want? What kind of color of that do we want? What style of the line do we want? We can even get down to the thickness of the underline. I can confidently say that I've never used anything other than line through and underline for text decoration, but it's kind of cool to see all of the different things that you can do there, and they show you some more examples. The other thing that I want to call out here is if you're like, all right, that's great, I understand text decoration, what about all the other things? Well, over on the left here, you can see every different CSS property. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. We're going to go through the top 10 roughly ones that I use the most. But if you're feeling like CSS is really cool, I want to explore, you can start going through these properties and going, all right, how does this work? And for certain things like padding, Command F, or you can go up to the search up here and search for it. But if I pop open padding, sometimes they have visuals in here, and sometimes they just lay things out in a way that makes it easier to understand. So I'm more of a fan of W3 schools, not only for beginners, but also at my level, because I think the information you're looking for the most tends to be easier to find in W3 schools, but MDN does a better job of exposing all of the different things that you can do with it and get more complex with it. So either one that works for you is totally fine, but this documentation is out there, so you don't always have to take it from me. Know that I reference this all the time. I will come in here and I'm like, I don't remember how to change the color of a text underline, right? And so I'll go into this property, look it up, or I may be like, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know what that CSS property is called. And at that point, you can always go to Google and type in CSS change color of underline. And the first thing that will come up is text decoration, CSS, either in W3 schools or MDN. Okay, any questions about documentation? All right, so we saw 2 ways of applying our style. We saw our inline and we saw our style block or style tag up at the top. There is a 3rd way to do it, and this will be the trickiest that we have done all night. Oftentimes, we actually don't want our CSS in our HTML because it can get really muddy, right? We can have all of our HTML, all of our CSS, and you kind of have to code switch, right? You kind of have to go, wait, that's a different language. I got to be in a different syntax here. Oftentimes, we want to separate it out and go, all of my HTML content is over here in this file. All of my CSS is over here in this other file. In order to accomplish that, I'm going to go over to the File Explorer. If you already have it open, that's fine. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to be very unique here. I'm going to call it style.css. Why don't I call it styles.css? A lot of people do. Some people call it index.css. Naming doesn't really matter here, as long as whatever you name this file over here is what you put into your HTML in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I am going to target my H2, and I will make that a color of orange. I save that. I come over to my browser, and I do not get orange. I'm like, why not? I put an H2 here. I told it my color is orange. And if I look at my index.css, there's nothing wrong with it. My H2 is here, and this style isn't blocking it. That's why we say it's cascading style sheets, because the two will kind of cascade over each other and combine each other in the browser. So I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Well, I need to tell my HTML file that my CSS file exists, because we could have 10 different CSS files and only want one of them to apply to this HTML. So in order to make that work, up in my head tag, I'm going to create a new one called link. And we can actually link to several different things in our head, several different file types. So I need to tell it, hey, the relationship, REL, of this file, you're going to treat this as a style sheet. And the place you're going to find that style sheet, the hyperlink reference, or href, is going to be style.css. And that's going to be a self-closing tag, because we don't need to put any other information into it. This link tag has two different attributes. One is called rel with the value of style sheet. The other one is href with style.css. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And if everything is working, you should have your H2 in SU colors.
So it wouldn't, so it doesn't matter where you put like the style, like for example, like style and H1 is the color magenta. Like, is it like, so my thing is, does it really matter where you put the style at, or?
The order of it kind of matters, but I could take this H1 and throw it in my style.css and it would work exactly the same. So no, it doesn't really matter. You can do any one of these three. However, it's more preferred to have it in a separate style sheet for now, because it kind of makes your code easier to read, right? You go, all my HTML's here, all my CSS is over here. I don't need to worry about it. You know, the two are separated. When we get into React, that answer kind of changes a little bit. But for now, it's more preferred to do it in a separate style sheet. Then the second preference would be a style tag up at the top. And then the last one would be an inline style. But all three accomplish the exact same thing, just three separate ways to do it.
And there's no limit of how many properties you could put in it, right?
No limit of the number of properties and no limit to the number of selectors, and we call this a CSS block. That whole thing is called a block. So yeah, no limit to that. Michael.
Is it possible when going back and forth between the style sheet and putting in inline style stuff, is it possible to have conflicts, and what happens when I'm calling out two things in different places?
Yeah,
Or
that's
same thing in two different places.
Really good question. And that's kind of the cascading nature of it, of if the two aren't conflicting, it won't matter, right? So I did my orange in my external style sheet, and then I did my text decoration in my inline styles, and no problems there, right? But if I go into my style.css here and say, no, I would like my text decoration to be a line through instead, you'll see that doesn't apply. That's because inline styles always will override whatever is in our external style sheet. So it is possible for them to conflict. And it's actually intended to be that way, because sometimes we may want to say, I want all of my H2s to be underlined, but this particular H2 I would like to be a line through instead. And that is okay. That is not invalid CSS. That is not bad CSS. It is intended to cascade over each other. But inline styles will always override external style sheets. And what we call a more specific selector, which we're going to get into in a second, will always override a more broad selector. So there's a way that we're going to learn very next thing, actually, where we can say, hey, only apply this to this specific H2, but make all the other H2s this other styling. And those two that's a totally fine thing to do in CSS.
I have an additional question on that.
Yeah.
So you said that inline overrides external, but what about within the style tags? Which one takes precedence over those ones?
That is the order, right? So if this link comes after this style tag, anything in here will override anything in here. However, if we move this link tag up to up here, that means anything in here will override anything in here. So they're
Okay, so
kind
it
of,
follows like traditional order of operations for the computer.
you got it. All great questions. We don't worry about cascading as much as you think until you get into more advanced applications where you'll end up having hundreds or thousands of selectors. So the order matters less than you think, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that you want to completely forget about. And we can have as many style tags as we want, we can have as many link tags as we want, and we can have as many inline style tags as we would like. But that doesn't mean we should, right? So generally, we want to prioritize putting all of our style in an external sheet just to make the code easier to read, but that doesn't mean it's a requirement. Any other questions? Okay. So, so far, well, I'll show you one tip here. We're switching back and forth between these two tabs, right? And that can get annoying. Well, VS Code has their own kind of window management built right into the software. So I can grab my style.css, and up here at the top, I'm able to split these files out. So if I wanted my style.css to kind of be a split screen, I'm able to click on this icon right here. Oh, no, I take it back. That is not doing what I wanted it to do. What I'm able to do instead, oh, come on. What I'm able to do instead is go to Finder. Let me reopen my files here, sorry. I'm able to grab the style.css. It's this icon that I was looking for, sorry. One under. Go down there, and I'm able to click on that, and it splits it out into two different windows. Now, it's kind of weird because it also leaves my style.css open on the other side. So I'm able to just close that, and now I'm able to do a split screen between those two. I am also able to open up my style.css, have it in two separate tabs. And if I don't want it left and right, if I want it top and bottom instead, I'm able to grab this tab and kind of just drag it to the lower half of the screen, wait for that gray rectangle, the lighter gray rectangle to be that half, and drop it down there. And that allows me to have both windows open at the same time. And then, of course, you can kind of get that middle bar. And once you get that different mouse cursor, drag that down so you've got two separate sections. So I'm going to leave it like this. You are welcome to leave it in two separate tabs. You're welcome to do whatever window management you would like. But this allows me to view both the HTML and CSS open at the same time. Now you're starting to see why we give you external monitors, because we've got lots of different window management going on here. Any questions on any of that so far?
I was trying to get my style file just like yours. Mine's was a little finicky. Can you do that one more time?
Yeah, and that's just VS Code that's finicky. Reminder that you can always open and close your sidebar here by just clicking on the Explorer icon. And then up at the top, what I did is I grabbed my style.css by the tab, and then as I drag it down, you see how that gray rectangle is my whole screen? I don't want that. So if I keep on going down to the lower half, it will shrink that rectangle down for me. When I let go of it, it will split it. And then I can grab that middle nav bar by the top of it and drag it down to what I want.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about external style sheets. Let's talk about selectors here. Because if I'm in here and I make, let's say, another H1, and I say this should be green, and I refresh, oh, my go live got disconnected. I see that is in pink. And I'm like, well, I don't want that to be in pink. I would like to make this H1 a different color, but I don't want to necessarily use this inline style tag because that could get a little messy, right? Because I'm going to repeat that over and over and over again. What if I want to make something where I can make anything that I apply something to green? So I can make a p tag here and say this should be green too. Well, how do I make that kind of a reusable thing? Well, believe it or not, I can make up my own names for something, and I'm going to call this green text. Okay, I put a period in front of it. That period, when I'm in CSS land, means a class. That class name is green text. Notice I did a capital T there. You don't have to, but it is case sensitive. So a lowercase t and a capital T are separate. So make sure you get that casing right. And then I'm going to say the color of that is going to be lime green. I save and nothing happens. I've now made this CSS class and nothing changed. I now need to apply that CSS class, this selector, to something in my HTML. This CSS needs to be able to select something in my HTML. So to do that, I'm going to go to my H1 and I'm going to say class equals green text. I am also going to apply that class to my p tag and save and make sure I spell text properly. Again, remember, case sensitive, and this period in the CSS is lining up with the class property there. That doesn't make sense yet. That's okay. Maybe it'll click when I show IDs next. And now we have our green text applying to two separate things. So classes are always allowed to be reused. I'm always allowed to make this once and apply this class to as many different places as I want in my HTML. Hopefully this is the same as the prep work you did for the tech assessment. However, this is your chance to ask questions. So if you had questions that popped up when you were doing the prep work, now is your time to ask them. Give you all a minute there to catch up.
Mine did not change. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not.
No problem. Go ahead and share your screen. Okay, so a couple things we want to test here. The first thing that I say is, hey, is this working, right? Because we can see our H2 is orange here. That means that our style sheet right here is working. So that's not a problem. So the next thing I'm going to say is, all right, do we have a period here because the period lines up with the class? That is all right. What isn't right is this right here needs to line up exactly with what is right here. And the other thing I notice is now that that's all lining up, I'm like, all right, all of that looks good. But what do we have right here?
Oh, okay.
So go ahead and save that, and you are green.
Sweet.
Good work.
Thank you.
Oh, they moved the stop share. There we go.
There we go.
I'm going to put my code back up on the screen. And in a minute, we're going to start we'll start a live share after breaks. You guys can get practice seeing my code and being able to reference it when I'm not sharing my screen. The my code link in Canvas is now updated. So after every class, a couple minutes after class, I will upload all of the code that we do. It's not available during class. Will you use the live share for that? Oh, excuse me. We'll use the live share in class. That's kind of like a more Google Doc style that you can see the code as I'm typing it. We'll get into that in a second. But after class, the live share links will no longer work. So you'll use the my code link in GitHub in Canvas instead, and that has all of the code that we worked on the day that we did it. Like I said, a couple minutes after class. Anyone not have green text? No, it's a little slow. Don't worry. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
So I just noticed, like, after you just showed him how he didn't have it aligned, I was having the same problem as well. But I had the green text in lowercase. Everything was lowercase. Once I capitalized the T in text, it actually changed the color to my typo green.
Yeah, so it, as long as this matches this, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So I could call this purple and still have the color line green here, and it would still be green. We are able to make up whatever name of the class we want right here, and as long as it matches what is in here, it doesn't matter what we call it.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay. In addition to classes, we also have something called IDs. And IDs, unlike classes, cannot be reused. So an ID is something like a nav bar. A nav bar, we're only going to have one nav bar on the entire page. So IDs are used when we say, hey, I'm trying to target this one specific element, and that's the only element that I want to target. So let's say that we'll throw something in here that's a button. And that button, let's say we're going to make two buttons. One says submit, and the other one says clear. So we get our submit and clear buttons, but let's say we want to make the clear a red button instead. Well, I don't want to target all buttons, and this is going to be the only clear button on my entire page. So I don't really want to target, I don't want to make a class because classes are designed to be reused. Green text I can put on anything, and anything I put it on is going to turn that green. So what I'm going to do instead down here is I'm going to create an ID that says clear button. And that's not going to do anything until I use that down in my CSS. But because we use the period here, that period in CSS land says line up with class. The ID, however, is going to line up with a # or a hashtag, depending on how old you think I am. So we're going to put that Shift-3 in, and we're going to say clear button. And again, I put a capital B here. That means there's got to be a capital B down here. If you prefer dashes, that's fine. But we can't put spaces in IDs or class names. So this is called something called camel casing. We'll get into that when we learn JavaScript. Dashes and underscores are fine to use in CSS. But I'm going to say clear button, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to make the color of that text white and the background of that, if I can spell, red. Now, first time that we've seen two properties in our CSS, but again, this # or hashtag is lining up with the ID here. The name of this clear button is lining up with the ID down here. And I just made that up. I could call that anything that I wanted to, as long as it doesn't have a space in it, or start with a number, oddly. And then our curly brace, and then our two different properties with their values. And that turned one of my buttons into a red background with white text. Now, what we are not allowed to do is let's say that I'm working on this page and I go, oh, I want another clear button. If I paste that in, I do get another button, right? And I can change the text on this and I can say like clear all or clear just this. And that technically works, but now the browser is kind of mad at me because while class names are allowed to be repeated and applied to multiple elements, IDs are meant to be unique. And so when we get into JavaScript and even when we work with our CSS selectors, the browser's like, all right, I can figure out that you probably want that to apply to both, but IDs aren't supposed to be repeated anywhere on the page. So this is technically invalid HTML and CSS. We're not supposed to, well, more HTML and CSS, but we're not supposed to repeat IDs anywhere on the page. So my options are to either convert this to a class by making this a period and using the word class here instead of ID. But what I'm going to do is take this out, and that makes it back to valid HTML. Now, what happens if you make a class and only use it once? That's totally fine. But if you make an ID and use it multiple times, that you're not supposed to do. So just something to keep in mind. Don't repeat IDs. Classes are fine to repeat.
Wait, how did you change the clear button background? Because mine's look kind of off.
So you should have a hashtag here or a pound sign here. Make sure you've got your ID here. Make sure that the ID is matching whatever you have down here. And then that you have two properties, one for the color of the text and the other for the background. And if it still isn't working, you can share the screen.
Oh, I got it.
Cool.
You know what I forgot to do? With ID and clear, I forgot to add the arrow to the left when it's like opening.
Yep.
I forgot to add that.
Yep. Well, I shouldn't say every character matters because spaces don't matter, but other than spaces, which sometimes matter, every character matters. Okay. We're going to pause here and kind of go rapid fire before break. So I don't want you to follow along here. You can practice with all of this after class tonight or anytime this week. I have to check what the homework assignment is. I'm blanking. Homework assignment is working with the grid. So we're going to cover that after class tonight. But I'm going to kind of go through rapid fire here, some different properties that we use. Don't feel like you need to follow along with this. You can always practice afterwards, but I just want to show you different properties that we use. So one is the box model. And the box model is one of those things that kind of helps to understand visually before we use it for our before we use it ourselves. So content is the innermost thing. Inside our content, we wrap everything in padding. Then we do our border around the padding, and then we do the margin outside of that. Okay, well, what does that mean? What that means is in our button, if we want to say, hey, you know, that text is a little too close to the top. I would like some breathing room, some what we call white space around that button to make the button a little bit bigger, but to have it still inside. Well, in order to do that, I can go down to my clear button and I can say, I would like 10 pixels of padding all around that button. Now I have made that button a little bit bigger, but still inside. Background is affected by padding, but it is not affected by margin. Well, what do I mean by that? What if I want this to be down the page more? What if I want to leave a gap right before I have my buttons there? That's what I'm going to use margin for. So I can say margin, and I can say I would like 50 pixels of margin, and now all of a sudden I get a gap outside of that. So margin is used for getting space between your element and other elements. Padding, on the other hand, is used inside the element to get space around what goes inside that content. Now, this isn't quite what I wanted, right? I just wanted this to get down, pushed down on the top. Well, believe it or not, I can just say margin dash top, and now that margin is only applied to the top there. Okay, I kind of see what it's doing, but I don't really, I need a visual for that, right? So if I right click on this and go down to inspect, now I'm doing this in Chrome. You can also do this in Safari, but you may want to download Chrome just so you can follow along with me if you are still using Safari. I'm going to pop that open, and I'm actually going to hover over that clear button. And you can see that orange gap is there. That is showing me the visual of my margin. That is showing me, hey, what is making this space appear is that 50 pixels of margin. And what's kind of cool, I'm going to expand this just a little bit more and scroll down to the bottom. You can also see our box model down here. And the box model is showing me I don't have any margin on the left, the right, or the bottom, but I do have 50 pixels of margin at the top. And if I hover over the padding, that's kind of hard to see on that red background. So let's do that instead on, I'll throw an ID on my clear button. Or you know what, let's do it on green text. Now my green text has 30 pixels of padding all around it. If I click on my green text and hover over it, you can see it is showing me a visual of where that padding is, right? It's just white right now, but if I hover over that in my box model, I can see that is there. Where is my margin 16 pixels coming from? That's a default on any paragraph tag. Paragraph tags by default have some margin above it and below it, but not on the sides. If I wanted to get rid of that, I could by just saying margin 0. And that would get rid of my margin. So anyway, this is a visual way. If I hover over that, we can see both the padding, and if I take my margin back out, excuse me, I can also see the orange around it. So that is the box model working. And yes, all browsers have, almost all browsers have inspect tools. Some are better than others. Most of them have all kind of caught up to each other, but any browser that you want to use is fine. Just keep in mind that if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, Chrome is going to be the browser for you. Okay, any questions on the box model? So we always go, whenever we are trying to give space inside the content, it is padding. Whenever we want to move that element away from other HTML elements, it's going to be margin, and then border is what sits right in between those two. Okay, rapid fire. We did margin, we did padding. We already saw background for the first time. We can make background apply to anything. So I can do, I can target my H1. And I can say I want the background color of my H1 to be aqua, and save that. And now both of my H1s are showing up with that background color. We can also change the font family. So I can say font family, and I could say something like Courier, and that will change that font there. We are only able to use built-in fonts like Courier, and this is something called a fallback. So if it can't find Courier new, it will use Courier. If it can't find Courier, it will use the browser default of monospace. We will learn in the next couple weeks how to install other fonts, but there are only about 10 web-safe fonts that we can use without installing them. And if you just do a Google search for web-safe fonts, you'll see the defaults that are installed on almost every browser. But we'll learn how to install other ones outside of that. All right, font family, we also have height and width. So something that we've been using is buttons and P tags and H1s. But what if we want to put just a generic wrapper, right? What if we want to say, hey, there's a box around this? that is something called a div, which is short for a division. And by default, that div isn't going to show anything until we until we go and style it. So I'll put a div in here that says 1 paragraph of text. And let's say there's a button here too. And I see that, and that div doesn't look any different, right? If I take this div out, it would show the exact same way. But a div, a division, is something that we can group together. We can say both of these elements are inside this div, just like we can say these buttons out here are inside the body. So now I can apply an ID to this of a group of elements, let's say. I can target that, and because I used ID here, I have to use a pound sign or hashtag here. And now I can apply a couple things to this. So I can put a border around that of 5px dashed and maroon. Save and take a look. Forgot to save my index.html. Make sure you're saving both of them. Now I get my dashed line around that. What if I don't like that text right against the edge? Well, I'm able to add some padding to that, let's say of 10px. That got it off the edge there. But I am also able to specify things. So I could also say, instead of this height being auto-calculated and basically just growing based off of what content I put in there, I can specify a height. I can say, I want that to be 100 pixels. Let's do 200 to make it a little clearer. And now I can see that height is set. I don't recommend using height and width, especially for text content. It's almost always better to let the browser figure out the height and the width. So these are not properties that height and width in particular are not properties I recommend using, although you totally can. And then just to show you that we can do width, we can make that 200 pixels. That will shrink up the box a little bit. And then the last thing I will show you before break is text align, and we can text align center. And that will get my text centered in the box. A lot of rapid fire there. If it's not working, that's okay. When we come back, we are going to do our very first live share so that you can see my code. And then we will get into installing Bootstrap and using the grid for the first time. So what if I want to take this whole box and get it showing up over here to the right? That's what we are going to play around with for the first time when we get back. Any questions before we go on break?
Yes, quickly. What would you
Yeah.
suggest doing instead of setting the height and width?
Yeah, so I recommend leaving those out. So if we take those out, I'm just going to comment them out, even though we haven't covered that yet. You'll see it kind of auto-fills that space. So even though I didn't set a height, it figured out the height of that box based off of what's in it, right? That's a really important thing for responsiveness, because if I shrink this all the way down, you'll see the box shrinks with it. But if I set a width of that box to something like 1,000, now all of a sudden that box, I got to scroll all the way over, even though my window isn't big enough to show that. So if I just didn't set a width there, the box is going to take up the full width of the page, and I can shrink it down or expand it out, and it will automatically fill that space. What we are going to learn after the break is how to use the grid system to set widths based off of the grid, and then heights are almost always best to set either using percentages or let the browser just default to it. So I'm a big fan of the grid system. I like to use that for all of my widths. I like all of my heights to be either figured out by the browser or some kind of percentage. But they are properties that you definitely can use, but you want to be careful because as a beginner, you'll use height and width to do a lot of your layout, and then you'll start trying to get into responsiveness and realizing that the width that you set is based off of your 13-inch laptop screen, and as you shrink it down, it doesn't do exactly what you want it to. So I shouldn't say don't use them, but you want to use them very intentionally, especially if you're using the grid system. But that will come with more practice.
Awesome.
Very
thank
good question. Any other questions? Okay, go on break, be back at 7:30, and we will see you then. Give everyone a minute to jump back in here. All right, so we are going to get our live share set up for the first time. This is going to allow you to kind of code along with me. And live share is kind of finicky. So the first day that we do this is always rough to get your code open and my code open at the same time. You guys are also going to have to create GitHub accounts. They are free. And if you already have one, before you ask, you can use that one. You do not need to create a new GitHub account if you already have one. You will also be getting GitHub education for free, which is a really cool pack that GitHub offers that gives you all kinds of credits and applications you would normally have to pay for, you can get for free. So I will be getting you more details about GitHub education probably this week, if not next week. However, you don't need to create a separate account or anything like that. You can activate the GitHub education pack under your existing account or an account that you create. So for right now, a couple things to keep in mind for your VS Code. Let me reshare my screen. VS Code loves to open windows in your already open existing window, and it's really freaking annoying. So whenever you go to join a live share, you are going to want to join that from a new window that you don't have anything open in. So what you're going to do is, we've got all of our code up so far that we've worked on tonight. I'm going to go to File and New Window. That gives me two windows to work in VS Code. The keyboard shortcut is Command-Shift-N to open up a new window. And I'm going to go to Live Share over on the left. You may be tempted to click Live Share at the bottom. That's not what we're looking for. We are looking for the Live Share icon on the left, about halfway down the screen. Go ahead and click on that, and then you are going to click on the Join button here. And does it say up at the top, enter URL? Does it say sign in with GitHub?
For me, it's saying continue as anonymous or sign in.
So go ahead and sign in. You can do continue as anonymous, but then it's a pain every time because you have to set your name. So go ahead and hit sign in with GitHub. If you have an existing GitHub account, you can sign into it. If you've forgotten your password, go ahead and go through that flow right now, or create a new GitHub password or a new GitHub account. And I'm going to start a poll in Zoom. So if you were able to sign into GitHub, go ahead and vote in that poll yes. If you are still in the process, don't answer the second one. Just wait. Wait until you say yes. That's how I know how many people have signed in. And if you have questions or any problems, raise your hand or come off mute and ask them.
Is it supposed to take a minute to join?
No, you may need to, if you signed in and VS Code didn't update after about a minute, you may want to re-kick off the flow and see if trying it a second time works.
Okay.
After you sign in, it should ask you for a URL that I
Oh.
haven't provided yet.
Okay. I think that's what it's waiting for.
Yes. So up at the top, if you see what I have on my screen right now, enter the URL of the collaboration session, you probably were able to get into GitHub already. So I'm going to give everyone a minute there to catch up.
And you said vote for the top answer, right? Not the don't vote for me, wait until the answer above is yes.
Yes. Every time I do that, someone goes, no. And I'm like, no. I just need to know when you're done. I don't need to know that it's not work. Well, I need to know if it's not working, but. So if you did get it working and the Zoom poll did not pop up, head back over to Zoom, find the poll down at the bottom, I think, in the toolbar, and vote yes for the poll. If you are having problems, raise your hand or come off mute. Michael.
No, I'm just finding out that I can't get back into my old GitHub account because it was linked to my old school email address and there's nothing going on there. So I guess I have to make a new GitHub account.
Yes. That drives me nuts when schools take away your email address. Like, why? It's not that
Well, I got back
expensive.
into it. They just said we're not going to take any new emails either.
About 13 people in. Give you guys one more minute there. And if you're having problems, you can use sign in anonymously tonight. Just know that it's going to ask you for your name, and then you just type in your name or something in and hit enter. That doesn't matter too much. But this is 10 times easier if you can get into your GitHub account, and you will need free GitHub accounts for Nathan's Week coming up in 4 weeks, 3 weeks, somewhere around there. So to get them created now is a good idea.
All right, I created my GitHub account and I still see that it still says signing into github.com,
So
even though I'm signed in.
you may want to go back to VS Code, and if
Mhm.
you hit the escape key, it should
Mhm.
take you back into the live share where you can click on join,
Mhm.
and then try signing in with GitHub now.
Okay.
Sometimes when you create a new account, it gets lost in like the flow.
Mhm. Okay.
And if you have something that looks like this on your screen without that URL in there, well,
Yeah, the URL is up there now.
cool. That means you're signed in.
All right. Is it in chat?
The poll. No, I haven't posted the URL yet.
Okay. Okay.
Desiree, no problem. It's worth figuring out how to get back to that poll. If you're in the Zoom window, it should have polls down at the bottom. And if not, I think you go to more and then it shows up under polls. But it's always a pain to find it once the window disappears.
Mm-hmm.
All
Thank
right,
you.
any questions? Yeah, no problem. Any questions? Anyone need help? Okay, I am going to paste the URL into the Zoom chat. You can copy that URL, and again, the only way you don't click on that link because it's tempting and VS Code does something dumb and it opens it in a window you don't want it to. So right click on the link and hit copy link, and then go into the new window with that join button clicked, paste that link in there, and go ahead and hit enter. And I can see you guys joining over here. And once you were joined in, you should be able to go to the Explorer tab and see my index and my style.css.
Wait 1 second.
now that you guys are in, thank you all for voting in the poll. That's super helpful. I will be doing that more and more, where I will post a poll that says, did you get your code working? And the only answer is yes. And if the answer is no, and you're still working on it, just don't vote. And that's how I know how many people are done and how we can move on. So I'll be doing more and more polls as I teach. So now over in the live share, yours may not look exactly the same as mine, but under shared servers, it says live server. If you double click on that, that will open my live server that you can actually access on my computer. So you can not only now see all of my code as I'm typing it, but you'll also be able to see my version of it in the browser, and you'll have that open in 2 tabs. So the one thing I will say is be very careful that you aren't accidentally in my version, because you'll be in your code and you'll write the code and you'll save it and you'll be looking at the browser and you'll be like, why is that color not changing? Or why is this not working? And you're like, I swear everything's right, letter for letter, everything is perfect. And then you realize you're on my version of it and not your version of it. So always make sure that when you are in your browser or in your VS Code window, or if you're in my code or your code, because oftentimes you'll have both of them open.
Wait, excuse me, where is the URL at? Because I just got done creating mine and it's not allowing me to join.
Should be in the Zoom chat.
All right, let me see.
And my recommendation is to never click on the URL from the Zoom chat, copy it, go back over to VS Code and paste it in. And that should, that's an easier way to join it, or a more reliable way, I should say. Not to say that the clicking the link won't work, but if you click on the link, sometimes you open VS Code in the web browser, and that can be even funkier to use. So just a word of warning for you there on advising you not to click the link.
Yeah, sure, because I'm still going through the same problem as well. It's still authenticating. I'm just looking at the screen.
Go ahead and share your screen. Sometimes you can get caught in a loop there that I can help get you out of. This process is always a little bumpy, but we've found that it's worth it, because then you get to kind of you know, see my code as I'm typing it. All right, let me request.
Yes.
I'm gonna cancel this and we're gonna restart the process.
Yeah.
And then sign in and GitHub and allow.
All right, there.
It's not you. Sometimes this process gets funky. Okay, now if we go to, I can't open the Zoom chat in a screen share, but if you go to the Zoom chat, you should be able to copy and paste the link in there, and then you should be good to go.
Yes, sir.
Zoom is weird with the screen sharing permissions. There's certain things I can't do, and getting into the Zoom chat is oddly one of them.
Yes, sir. All right. There we go.
Perfect. And then one other thing to show you, now that you can see my files, you can also go back to the live share over here and then double click on my live server, and that will open up my version of the code.
Okay.
And you're good to go.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else struggling? Right. We will get in the habit not only of setting up our files every day, but also joining the live share that I have set up. This link does change every day, so just a heads up for you. So I'll paste it in the Zoom chat, and this link will disappear or stop working right at the end of class, because I shut my computer down at 8:30. I am done with y'all, and I'm done with coding. So if you would like my code after class when the live share closes, if you head over to Canvas under the module section, down here, I have a C6 My Code GitHub. So if you pop that open, you will find everything is organized just the way we organize it in class. Obviously, only day one is here. At the end of every day, within like 15 minutes at the end of class, I will post my code. You can go ahead and open that, and in index.html, you can see everything that we did yesterday. So by the end of class, definitely before the YouTube video posts, I will upload this code so that you can see what we're working on and reference that. But in the meantime, you are welcome to use those live share links. Any questions on live share? Okay, so now we get to the fun part of, you saw that I just styled this button, right? But that's a lot of work.
Screen, Max.
Oh, thank you. You can see we styled this button, but this is a lot of work, right? And we want to kind of be able to say, well, someone else has probably already styled a button, right? And we could go on the internet and find some CSS and copy and paste it, but we really want to be careful with copy and paste. And that goes not only for code that we find on the internet, but also for code in my own code that you just go, oh, he already wrote that. Let me just copy and paste that in. Because you need the muscle memory practice, right? You won't get good at typing code unless you practice that. You also won't get good at understanding concepts if you go, yeah, that kind of just makes sense. Let me throw his code in there. There is a old term called a script kiddie. And a script kiddie is someone who like never really understood the HTML, but someone else made something cool on their MySpace page and you wanted it to work on your MySpace page, right? So what did you do? You felt like you were hacking the internet. You took this HTML code or this JavaScript code, you threw it in your MySpace and you're like, haha, my code is so, my homepage, my profile is so cool, right? And you really want to be careful around that, because code and engineering as a whole is all about understanding what you are building. And so whenever you're working with my code, whenever you're working with code on the internet, it's totally fine to go on the internet and say, why is this broken? What does this error message mean? Or to get inspiration, to look at someone else's portfolio website and go, that's really cool. I want to build that on mine. But you never want to just take that code blindly. You always want to read through that code and say, do I understand what's going on here? And that can be a great use of a one-on-one. You can book a one-on-one with me and be like, hey, I found this cool thing on the internet, but I don't fully understand it. Can you help me understand how that code works? Maybe not in week 1 or 2, right? But as you start getting going, that can be a great thing. So just, I know I've said it before, but again, make sure you've got that level of understanding. That's going to be the most important part. Okay, we are going to dive into the grid system here. So Bootstrap, circling back, sorry, went on a little script kiddie tangent there. Bootstrap is really great because it is not only pre-built components, so they'll have a form field that looks a lot nicer. They have buttons that look a lot nicer. We're going to get into the component side of things in the next couple of days. What we're going to do today is focus on the installation and the introduction to the grid. So to install Bootstrap, and you guys are going to get so sick of doing this process that this is going to become muscle memory as well. We are going to open a new tab and we are going to go to getbootstrap.com or Google Bootstrap and it will be the first thing that comes up. It is not bootstrap.com. I forget what is at bootstrap.com, but the official URL is getbootstrap.com. While you guys are pulling that up, what is Bootstrap? Where did it come from? Well, all of these guys at Twitter, really great engineers, 10 times better at CSS than I am, kept on starting these new projects. And they were like, this is really dumb. Every time that I start a new project, there are certain things that I want to do in my CSS. I want my buttons to be pretty. I want my form inputs to be pretty. I may need a header component or a navbar component. And every time I create a new website, I got to do this from scratch. That seems really redundant, right? And so what Bootstrap did is they said, hey, we are going to set up this framework that has all of that pre-built. And now whenever I start a project, instead of having to write hundreds of lines of CSS, I'm going to just have this be my starting place. And then I can always customize that styling as I go. So Bootstrap, I use the word install loosely. You don't really install Bootstrap. It's not something that you put on your computer and open like VS Code. Instead, it's just another style sheet that we put on every page that we need to have Bootstrap on. So I'm going to go to Docs up at the top. Again, I'm on getbootstrap.com. I'm going to go to Docs. I'm going to, the introduction is the first page that loads. I'm going to scroll down to this link tag right here under number 2, highlight that all the way to the end. I don't need any other line of code here. I only need this link tag. That is under number 2, link. It's the only link tag in number 2. Go ahead and copy that. Make sure you scroll all the way to the end of that text line because it's a really long line. Go ahead and copy that. You're going to go back over to your code. Make sure you're not in mine because it's read only on mine, so it won't let you actually paste into my code. We're going to go up above the link tag between the style and the link. Why is this important? Because if we put this beneath our own link tag, Bootstrap will override all of our styles. We don't want it to do that. We want to be able to override Bootstrap styles. So between the style tag and the link tag, go ahead and paste that really long line in. Now, when I save mine, it splits it out into multiple lines. Don't worry, yours can stay all on one line. It will work exactly the same. That's not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and save that in, and then I'm going to come back over to my my code. And the thing that you should notice is the font has changed a little bit. It has changed from Times New Roman, I believe, which is the default, at least in Chrome on Mac. I think, don't quote me on that. And it should now be, I believe it, Arial is the font that it uses. So you'll notice things just changed a tiny little bit in your file. Again, the steps, getbootstrap.com, go to the read the docs or click on the docs button. Under introduction, we're going to scroll down to number 2, and it's the only link tag in number 2. That's what we want. We're going to highlight that line all the way to the end and copy it. We're going to come back over to our file. Make sure you're not in my live share. And between the style tag and our link tag, we are going to paste in that link that we copied. We're going to do that step for almost every file that we create. If it is easier to go back to previous days and copy it from there, that is totally fine. This link will not change significantly. This link will change every now and then based off of the version of Bootstrap that we're using. But for now, we will be on Bootstrap version 5. A word of warning for you. When you are using the Bootstrap documentation, you'll see that it says 5.3 up here. This drives me crazy that Google does this, but every now and then you'll Google Bootstrap documentation and it will give you a link to Bootstrap version 3 or 4. And you'll be like, why isn't this working? I'm taking this right from the website. It's not working. Make sure that whenever you are in the Bootstrap documentation, you are in version 5 or that it says 5.3 in the URL. Because otherwise you will have a newer version of Bootstrap installed and be using older documentation. We have not done attendance yet, Austin. Actually, let's do attendance now. Go ahead and head to Canvas. The secret word for tonight is Bootstrap.
And also very quickly, if you don't mind sharing the extension that you have that essentially limits the text to within your window.
That's Prettier that's doing that. So we'll go over that in the next week or two. But if you want to install that and get a jump on it, I will not stop you.
Wouldn't it be also easier for the Bootstrap link is to like double click on the link sentence?
Yeah, you can highlight an entire line of text by double or triple clicking on it. So if that's easier, you can also do that. Good tip. The secret word tonight is Bootstrap. All one word. Well, doesn't matter. Okay, once you have attendance done, once you have Bootstrap installed, we should see the font change here a little bit. So this is a different font than the browser default. Now, for the real test of Bootstrap, we are going to use our first grid system. So what happens if I want this to be on the left half of the screen and this to be on the right half of the screen? Excuse me. Well, in CSS, we can do that with positioning. And while positioning is very powerful, there's a better way of doing it that often it is a better way of doing it called the grid system. However, the grid system is better described by someone else than it is by me. So we're going to pause for a second. We are going to use a YouTube video to describe the grid system, and then we are going to practice with the grid system. The grid system is not something you can master in a day, just like HTML and CSS is not something you can master in a day. So we're going to work our way up to it. We're going to start here tomorrow as well. But for right now, I'm going to show you this YouTube video. And as a oh no,
Um,
wrong video.
my
Question?
bootstrap didn't work.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
I did something wrong.
I don't think mine did either.
All right, can you see it?
I can.
Is it small? What do you see?
So the one thing I notice, look what you forgot to do.
A semicolon?
Nope. Look at the green.
Green.
I'm drawing on your screen. Can you see that?
Oh, save it? I thought I did save it. Let's see.
That did it.
This is it?
That's it.
Oh, my font changed?
Yep, just the font.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And as we learn more and more Bootstrap, you'll learn more about you know, how to use it and more changes than just the font, but just the font for now is how you know it's installed.
Ooh.
Harley, did you need help?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, share your screen. Okay, so you pasted it in. Go ahead and refresh in your browser. You're not using the live server. Okay, that wasn't the problem. Let me request remote. Oh, you know what? You're in your day 1 file, not your day 2 file. So if we change this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to stop your live share or your live server, excuse me, and go live again. And that's going to pop open the right file and that has your font change. So you weren't doing anything wrong. You were just in your day 1 file, not your day 2 file here. So as long as we're in the right file, you are all caught up.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. I am going to pause practice with that a little bit. So that video is linked, but you guys get the idea, right? There are a lot of different alignment classes. And if you're going, okay, well, how do I know where all of those are other than just that video? We can head back to the Bootstrap not sharing my screen. Head back to the Bootstrap documentation. And in this documentation, under layout, you see all different kinds of information here, right? So if we take a look at the columns or the grid section, we can see all kinds of examples here for vertical alignment and simple things, right? Of align item center compared to align items end. So they're going to give you all of these classes that you can use to align your content. But before we get into aligning content and getting columns in the right spot, we kind of have to understand columns and rows in the first place, right? So we always want to think about this as container is the outside section of the page. Then we go inside of that and our rows always go down the page. And rows can be whatever height that we want, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. Rows aren't necessarily always just across. I'm sorry, rows are always down, but rows could be something as small as just a line of text, or a row could be an entire section of your web page. So that's just something to think about. Then we go across. And when we go across, that column system is based off of 12 columns. Well, why 12? Does anyone have guesses as to why 12 instead of 10?
Because of the various content on the web page.
Yeah, basically 12 is a lot more divisible, right? So if we wanted to say, hey, I want 3 even columns, right? Well, if we do 10 divided by 3, we're going to get 3.33333, right? And we're like, oh, that's ugly. How do we do col dash 33333, right? That doesn't really work out. But when we divide by 6, or when we make it divisible by 12, all of a sudden that's much easier, because if we go, oh, we want 3 even columns, it would be a col 4, 4, and 4. That doesn't make sense to you right now. Let's play around with it a little bit, and you'll see kind of how that shapes out. Now, if this doesn't end up working for you, we may have a problem with your Bootstrap link. That link, you may not have gotten in there right. So the first kind of telltale sign that the Bootstrap is not installed is when you start to use the grid system and the grid system just doesn't work. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my code, right before the closing body tag. And before we are allowed to use columns, we need to put those columns in a row. And this is where we start getting into divs for the first time. Divs are that idea of a division of your website. Think about it as just a box to put your code in. So I'm going to make a new div, and I'm going to put a class on that div of row. Now, we didn't make a row down in our style. That's okay. Bootstrap has defined our class row already for us, so we don't actually need to write any CSS to make that happen. Inside my class row, I'm going to make another div, and I'm going to put a class on that of col-6. And I'm going to say my first col. I'm going to take that actually before, and instead of copying and pasting it, I'm going to get practice typing it out. So I'm going to make another col, and I'm going to say my second column. I'm going to save there. I'm going to go to my browser, and I see my first col and my second column. They should be left and right. If they are not left and right, make sure that your font up here is Arial or not Times New Roman. If it is, your Bootstrap is installed. If it's not, we've got a problem with our link. We got to fix that. If you don't have it left and right, come back here and check out this code. Did you get it in the class row? Do you have all of your opening quotes and closing quotes in the right spot? Are your divs inside this closing div for this row? If it is, play with the column widths a little bit. Check this out and see if you do a 4 and an 8, how it adjusts the text over in the browser. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen and have you guys play around with it. And I'm also going to start a poll to make sure that you got this working.
Maybe I missed this. Were we supposed to put everything within I think he had it in container class.
We'll cover containers tomorrow. That is best practice. And when we start a website from scratch, we'll put everything in a container. But for now, it's not a strict requirement for rows and columns to work, although it will prevent things like this scroll bar down here from giving you some like vertical scroll issues. So yes, in general, you should use a container, but for tonight, you don't need to worry about it.
Gotcha.
Very good question, though. All right, so
yeah, mine's. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say mine's is my first call and my second call isn't doing what it's doing below the box.
All right, go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay, so I don't see any problems other than the fact that you've got a 6 and an 8 in there. So 6 and 8 add up to above 12. So they're going to wrap, the second column is going to wrap down to the next column. So try changing that, yep, to a 4 and save and see if that fixes your problem. And it does.
I had that same issue and I just listened and fixed it.
That is why we share our screen, not only to get you individually as a student unstuck, it's to see what others code, what other mistakes people are making, because you may have the same. All right, we got 12 people in. I'm going to give you guys 1 more minute. Reminder to vote in the poll if you were able to get it working.
I missed the pool.
So in Zoom, if you go back into Zoom, there should be a polls button down at the bottom. And if there's not, check under more. And then I think the polls is in there. I unfortunately can't make it re-trigger on your screen. But it's the #1 way that I know that we're ready to proceed. And you guys are mostly all voted in, so we're going to keep going here. So the last thing I'm going to show you guys is we have the general concept of how that column is laying out, but it's kind of hard to see that, right? It's just based off of white space. So we can fix that by adding some borders to it and maybe some height. And like I said, height isn't something that I use regularly when I'm building a website, but when I'm getting the structure down for the right time, sometimes height can be really helpful to see kind of where that box is laying out without having to use the inspect tool. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, I'm going to add an additional class. So we've already seen how we can add classes, right? We already added a green class. And technically, I could come down in my CSS and target that column directly using the existing Bootstrap class. However, that's not usually a good idea, because when we modified the Bootstrap class, we're modifying every single col4 on the page, or maybe even the entire site. And we want to be careful about modifying the Bootstrap classes directly, because that may apply to other times that we use columns that we don't want it to. So best practice here is actually to add another class. So in our HTML, I'm going to add a class that says left col and another class called right col. Now I'm camel casing this. Again, that just means any subsequent words, the first letter of the word gets uppercased. If you like dashes more, that's totally fine. But I do have a space in here. In HTML land, we add additional classes by just separating them with spaces, making sure that they are still within that closing quote. Now I can come down here and say, hey, I would like my left col to have a border, or let's do background color to get started. Background of yellow. And I want my right col to have a background of orange. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I come over here. And reminder, make sure you save both your index and your style.css. And now I can see my columns. So once you get that working, play around with things a little bit. See if you can experiment with some CSS properties. See if you can experiment with getting another column size in. Play around with maybe another row. Maybe I'm going to copy this whole thing and say, hey, I'm going to leave out the sizing and see what happens. So I save that. I come over here. Now I get 2 equal size columns. I can play around with that and I can say, hey, on a medium-sized screen, I would like them to be equal. But on a small size screen, I would like one to take up 3 and the other one to take up 9. So I go ahead and I save that and I come over here. My medium-sized screen, if I expand it out, they're both 6 and 6. Why 6? Because it's 12 divided by 2. I have 2 columns that I want to be equal sizes. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So 6 and 6 lay it out. But when I shrink down my screen to be a little bit smaller, 1 goes to 3 and the other one goes to 9. Okay, now I can keep on experimenting with my grid and I can say, all right, what if I want 3 columns? I can copy that whole div, come down here, and I say my 3rd column, and all of a sudden my 3rd column is all the way down here. And I'm like, the heck, man, I want my 3rd column to be all in that same row. Well, there's not enough space. 6 plus 6 is 12 on its own. I need to space that out differently. So if I say 4, 4, and 4, 4, 4, and 4 all add up to 12. And so my 1st column, my 2nd column, and my 3rd column will all line up. But because I want them to be equal, I can actually just leave them as columns, and Bootstrap will do the right thing for me and equally space them out. And from there, I can do things like, hey, I want my left column to have a border of 1px solid red. And I can also do that on my right column. And now we can see those lines even better. So use the last 5 minutes of class and experiment here. Add in some margin, adding some padding, practice with your borders, practice adding rows. The most important thing here is look at how complex we're getting with our divs here. This is something called div soup, and we will start with comments tomorrow on how to fix that, right? Because now we've got divs inside of divs. So we always need to make sure that our closing div here lines up with our opening div here. What we don't want to do is start putting columns in rows that they don't belong to. So one really helpful tip here, other than the indentation, right? How do we know this div lines up with this div up here? It's indented, right? This arrow and this arrow start on the same level of indentation. If they don't, go in and tab in your columns here so that you can see that they are indented. The other tip is if you don't know what this div goes to, if you place your cursor in it, you see how this div up here kind of lights up in a light gray? They're telling you what those 2 divs go together. So if I click on this div, you'll see that the closing div highlights a little bit. That's just a visual cue to help you understand what divs are lining up. So play around with this. This is where we are going to leave class tonight. If you feel like you've got a good understanding of the grid system, you are all set. You can head out. But this is your opportunity to play around and ask any questions about the grid. Otherwise, have an awesome evening, and I will see y'all tomorrow.
So I got a question about with indenting. Like, do you need to like put like 4 spaces, or do you like tab? Like, I don't.
That is a age-old question that there is no technically right answer to. VS Code by default uses 4 spaces as a tab. So if you hit the tab key, it will insert 4 spaces for you. That is what I recommend. There are some developers who prefer to hit the space bar 4 times. I think they are absolutely insane. But if you would like to hit the space bar 4 times instead of hitting the tab key, that is totally up to you.
I'm one of them. I want them to do like I like sometimes hit tab, but sometimes I do the not all the time. I just do the spaces like 4 times.
The problem with doing the spaces is it's really easy to accidentally do 3 or 5 instead of 4. And then all of a sudden your code isn't lining up the exact same way. So you will never hear me or see me go space, 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 space. I will always use the tab key. But you know, if you may belong in an insane asylum, go ahead and use the 4 spaces. That's totally fine. Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm a little
Nah, this is not a problem. Like I said, I gotten used to the tab, but like sometimes like I like hit the spaces. So I'm like, ah, crap, doing the spaces.
So yeah, by default, if you like highlight the even if you hit the tab key and then highlight it in VS Code, you'll see that there are actually 4 individual spaces that the tab key inserted. There is an entirely separate argument of should you use a tab character, which takes up the width of 4 spaces, or should you actually use 4 space characters? That gets a little technical. We'll save that for an open hack day where I can start a flame war of what people prefer. I'm personally a tab character guy instead of 4 individual spaces, but I recognize that that is not the way that the industry thinks about spaces. So anyway, that's a rabbit hole for another day. The short answer to a long question is 4 spaces are fine, or the tab key, but the tab key is preferred, so it's always consistent.
I got a question.
Yeah.
All right. Why? I don't know if there's any truth to this or not. Why is centering a div known as such a painful
Notoriously difficult.
exercise?
Okay, so I will try to keep the answer short here. Centering text has never been difficult in CSS. That's always been easy. Centering divs has always been difficult, right? And so about 10 years ago, they started working on this technology called Flexbox that came out in CSS3, and about 5 to 8 years ago, it started being widely supported in every browser. So what you used to have to do with centering a div is get hacky with margins, which you could do horizontally fine, but vertically was even challenging. So horizontally, you could say like, oh, I want a margin of 0 on the top and bottom, and then auto on the margin. And what auto meant was put equal amount on the left side and the right side based off of whatever the size of the container or the window is, right? And that worked kind of well for again horizontal, but then when you needed to center things vertically, CSS does a pretty bad job of understanding this is my entire window width. So 100% height is very, or I'm sorry, 100% width is very easy to do. 100% height is kind of challenging to do right.
I see.
And so because of that, centering things vertically became more challenging. So 10 years ago, they started working on this. Rough timelines, don't quote me on the years. And then about 5 to 8 years ago, they started coming out with this thing called Flexbox, which is the idea of your divs should be flexible in that they can grow and that they can move around. So Flexbox really means flex to take up the amount of available space. And when you're not taking up the amount of available space, be flexible in positioning items around it. So we started to see that in the Bootstrap grid video of that we could say, flex these divs to the end or flex these items so that there's equal space between them, or center them so that there's equal space on the other sides of them. That's all what Flexbox is. And then the next level up from that is CSS grid, which is what Bootstrap 5 is based off of. I think it may be still Flexbox based, but I'm pretty sure it's CSS grid. Anyway, Flexbox and CSS grid are 2 things that the browsers use under the hood that you can absolutely learn how to use on your own. There is a optional homework assignment that we'll get to in a week or 2 called Flexbox Froggy, and it shows you how to use Flex to position items wherever you want. So Bootstrap is just providing you pre-made classes that make it easier to use Flexbox without having to use Flexbox in your CSS code directly. So centering things has always been hard. Flexbox made centering a whole heck of a lot easier. Flexbox adds a little bit more complexity to understand how it works, but once you do, aligning items wherever you want becomes much easier.
I see. Okay. Thank
I
you.
said that was going to be a short answer. It was not, but hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah.
Other
Uh,
questions for tonight?
Well, I don't really have a question, but for everybody that's like still here for that group study thing, I'm gonna be at Common Space around like 4 in the afternoon. So I'm gonna definitely remind for those who got left in the back channel that I'm gonna be there at like 4.
And definitely use that back channel for that, because other people may be like, oh, I wasn't planning on getting there until 5, but if you're going to be there at 4, I'll swing by. So definitely encourage you guys to practice on that. And it may not seem necessary now, but a couple weeks from now, you're definitely going to want to have those group studies. So getting it set up sooner rather than later is a great idea.
Yeah, that's why I want to let everybody know like now I was gonna attend at like around 4 in the afternoon. And for those who can't attend or want to like still come to the group thing, I was gonna try to like Zoom it through my personal Zoom. I don't know if that's an option or not, but
So if you don't have a paid Zoom, I think Zooms are limited to 30 minutes. So if you have a paid Zoom, you are totally welcome to use them. If you don't, you are welcome to use this Zoom classroom link. The only catch is if the recording is over 5 minutes long, it will auto post to YouTube. So as long as you're fine with it posting to YouTube, you're welcome to use this Zoom room link. And then there's no limit to the number of people who are in it or how long it goes.
okay, thanks.
And if you don't want it on YouTube, send me a Slack message and I can just take it down really easily or make it private.
All right, well, thanks. I'm gonna get ahead up. Everybody have a good night. Yeah, I guess I'll see you
Good
tomorrow.
night. All right.
Stick around for another minute for any questions or if your code isn't working. Otherwise, you're totally welcome to jump.
I just have a quick clarifying question.
Yeah.
So when thinking about bootstraps and Flexbox, you can optimize, right, their usages and their features by using both in unison, but oftentimes do you see people using one or the other?
Yeah, so you can definitely intermix them because Bootstrap is using Flexbox under the hood anyway. And if you're working on a large site, you will see that some developers prefer not to use Bootstrap and will just write their own CSS for the Flexbox.
Right.
And then there are other developers where if Bootstrap is installed, they'll just use those classes under the hood. So there are times that they are definitely intermixed. What you don't want to do is necessarily mix Bootstrap classes with your own CSS on the same div. So it's fine to intermix them on the same page. I would advise not to intermix them on the very same div, but that's not to say that it won't work. And that's how CSS works in the first place, right? With cascading. So
Right.
as long as you have the link in the right order of Bootstrap link and then your CSS, you can always use the Bootstrap CSS class and then apply your own class and apply your own Flex properties onto your own class.
Right, because I can imagine running into the issues such as if you were to try to implement something within the same div, you might face things having to do with prioritization and whatnot, and so what would actually show on the web page, whether what you'd anticipate being.
Yes.
So that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so CSS is really good at overriding itself. It's not invalid, it's not wrong. The browser will figure out the order based off of the order of your files. And then the order of CSS cascading is like what you think is really simple ends up being this really
Right.
complex thing. So it's not that you can't do it, but it's one of those KISS, keep it simple, stupid moments where you're like, I don't want to overcomplicate this. So it can be done, but you want to be careful unless you're doing it intentionally.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
clarifying. Yeah.
No
awesome.
problem. Have a
Enjoy
great night.
the rest of your night. Yeah, bye-bye.